First inductee tonight for the class of 2021 is Bob Byrd for basketball. Bob started officiating basketball in the 1969-70 season as a member of the San Diego County Basketball Officials Association. He was elected to the board of directors, and in his fifth year of officiating, he served on the board for 25 years until he retired in 2000. He was president of the board of directors, the rating chairman, and the association's representative for junior college basketball. Bob was an instructor for the new officials and did coaches clinics for 10 years. Bob refereed high school, boys and girls basketball for 31 years, officiating playoffs, including CIF state finals. He worked military basketball games and wheelchair games, also working as an official for junior college men's and women's basketball and NAIA men's and women's games. Bob was a Pac-10 men's and women's basketball official. He worked in the West Coast Conference's Big West Conference and the Western Athletic Conference, and at the height of his career, he was chosen to work NC2A Women's Division I playoffs for the years 1989, 90, and 91. Let's welcome Bob Byrd.
5 minutes, huh? First of all, I'd like to say I'm very honored and very proud to be voted in as a member of the Sports Officials Hall of Fame. I mean, it was totally unexpected. And there's a lot of people I like to thank, but they're not with us anymore. But one of the first ones was Brad Griffith. He passed away about 2 years ago. And he was a football coach at Mira Mesa for many, many years. Brad, in 1970, he asked me, he said, "Bob, why don't you come out and start officiating?" So I went to a game with him. I got hooked. And that was the start of it. Now, Brad and I were good friends. We met in the 9th grade. And when I joined the association, his best friend was a guy named Jim Gilchrist. Jim Gilchrist was the assignment secretary. That didn't hurt any. So. And then I had Mike Basallo call me, I think in 19 or 2021, and told me that he was nominating my name to be inducted. And I thank you for that, Mike. Mike was also my class instructor for the first 10 years that I worked basketball. And I couldn't ask for anybody to teach it any better than Mike taught it. And I listened and learned a lot, because when Mike retired from class instructing after 10 years, then he asked me to take over for him. And I thought that was quite an honor. And right away, with Gilchrist as an assignment secretary, I got thrown in to work some basketball with guys that I was just dumbfounded to be working with. And a couple of them were the Harvey brothers, Doug Harvey and his brother Nolan. And the first time I ever worked with Doug, I mean, to be in awe of somebody and to be treated so nice in the way he would treated a young guy trying to get up in basketball, it was unbelievable. And I got to work with him a couple of times that year. And I also worked for his brother. I used to work, back when I started, you worked a JV game and a varsity game for $21 for both games. And Nolan gave up 4 or 5 of his JV games that year so I could work and he could look at me and evaluate me. The guy that's not with us anymore, the guy named Ed Kane. I don't know how many of you knew Eddie. Eddie he knew the rules and everything. He was the last guy to hand in his test every time he had to take a test at the beginning of the year. But he was the coolest guy you ever met, and he was, as long as he was in the association, he was number one. And that was like 10 or 12 years in a row. He just knew how to handle people, and he taught me an awful lot. Another one was Jack Taylor. Jack Taylor was not liked by everyone, but Jack had a way about him, and when you screwed up, Jack let you know about it. But when you did something good, Jack told you about it. So after a while, I listened to Jack, and I learned an awful lot from him. Another one was Manny Gomes. I worked many, many ball games with Manny Gomes, and I learned a lot of good things to do in a certain situation. I also learned a lot of bad things not to do in a certain situation. But that's the way Manny was, but he... And then I got to be good friends with Dennis Ackerman came in about a year after I did, and we became good friends right off the bat. And right away, after 10 years, we were really good friends. And guess who got nominated for the assignment secretary? Dennis. So that didn't hurt either. And then the last one I'd like to thank was a guy named Joe Frivolsky. I don't know how many of you knew Joe, but Joe could scare the hell out of you. And my first year that I worked basketball, Joe Frivolsky, I'm a probation guy. Then you had to, first year you were on probation. My first year, he shows up at one of my games. Afterwards, we talked. He said, "Bob, can I tell you some things?" I said, "Sure, Joe." He says, we talked about a situation. He says, the call wasn't that bad. He said, but you didn't handle it very well at all. I said, so I listened, and he told me about it. About halfway through the season, he shows up at another one of my games. And after the game, he come in and he said, "Bob," he said, "you got a minute?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You're doing a little better." I said, "Thanks, Joe." Now, the very last game I worked that year, Joe showed up at my game again, 3 times that year. And I know he was sent by Jim Gilchrist, I think. And he said, "Bob, I just want to tell you one thing." He says, "I've never seen a guy come as far as you have in 1 year." He said, "You're going to do all right officiating basketball." And so there's 2 things that I would tell anybody who wants to officiate any kind of sport. First thing is listen. Good or bad, just listen. You can decide later on what you want to do with what you were told. And the second thing is be friends with the assignment secretary. Thank you.